Anyone who suffers with migraine, and roughly 1 in every 6 Americans does, knows the power of these most diabolical of headaches to bring life to a grinding halt. You do virtually anything to find relief, like resorting to heavy prescription drugs. And yet relief sometimes comes in a simpler and more natural form. My guest today, Dr. Rani Banik, as a neuro-ophthalmologist, was seeing patients with migraine when her own years-long migraine problem intensified, like a stabbing ice pick behind her eye, she says. The torment drove her to look beyond medication to nutritional and lifestyle paths to relief, and she will share the details of those today. Now an integrative medicine practitioner, Dr. Banik combines conventional eye and nervous system medicine with functional medicine, which uses diet and lifestyle change, including targeted nutrition, to treat the root cause of diseases, like dry eye, which often goes hand in hand with migraine, and like migraine, often comes with oversensitivity to light. Dr. Banik will now reveal how these conditions are linked, and the foods to eat, supplements to take, and the simple daily steps that can bring relief. Welcome to Vital Signs, where we learn how to get healthy from all angles, from the biochemical and nutritional to the things we do that nourish our minds and our souls. I'm Brendan Fallon. Dr. Banik, great to have you join us on Vital Signs today.
Oh, thank you so much, Brendan, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, I know that you've spoken about these 3 conditions, the migraine, dry eye, and photosensitivity or light sensitivity in connection. Today, I want to start off by talking specifically about migraine. I know that this is commonly seen as a neurological problem, so a sufferer might be referred to a neurologist for treatment. So I find it interesting that you, as an ophthalmologist, would be seeing someone for migraine.
So first of all, I'm an ophthalmologist, but I'm also fellowship trained as a neuro-ophthalmologist. So my field intersects with the brain. So all the pathways in the brain that are related to vision, how we see form and color and shape and movement, and also all the nerves that connect the eyes to the brain. So how we move our eyes, how we move our eyelids, that all falls under the purview of what I do as a neuro-ophthalmologist. And actually, migraine is a significant part of what I do as a neuro-ophthalmologist, because many people with migraine may come in with visual symptoms. Like, for example, some people may see flashing lights with their migraine. This is called aura, visual aura of migraine, where they can see some zigzag flashing lights that obscure their vision. That is very common. Also, the light sensitivity of migraine. So I help to manage all of these visual symptoms of migraine. And so I would say about 50% of my practice is based off of migraine and other types of headache patients. And not only that, I myself am a migraine sufferer. So I've had migraine since my early 20s. And there was a point in my early 40s when it became very severe, it became very chronic, and I ended up with chronic daily migraine. So I was basically waking up every single day with a very severe migraine headache, like a stabbing ice pick behind my eye. And I tried multiple different medications to try to resolve my symptoms. I was prescribed basically every migraine drug that was available by various different doctors, headache specialists in my area, and nothing was working. And it wasn't until I discovered the power of nutrition and lifestyle in managing chronic health issues that I finally started to get better. So I was introduced at the time to an area called functional medicine, which is a type of complementary integrative medicine in which we try to find the root cause of the problem and then deal with it through diet and lifestyle and supplements. So once I discovered functional medicine, I started to do my own research. I tried things on my own. I tried various different supplements. I completely turned around my diet. I made some major lifestyle changes. And then only then, after about 5 or 6 years into my chronic migraine, did I finally start to get better. So I have both a professional interest in migraine, but I also have a very deeply rooted personal interest in migraine.
Just to go back a little bit, the chronic stress that you mentioned as being a trigger for your migraine, what do you see physiologically? What is the process that's taking place that would lead to stress causing migraine in the brain?
That is a wonderful question, and I wish I had a solid answer for that. We can only hypothesize that chronic stress causes rising cortisol levels, and that leads the body down the path of inflammation, or a pro-inflammatory state. So that's the simplest way to try to explain it. Again, I don't think that in modern medicine, we've yet worked out the exact mechanism of migraine. There's still a lot we don't understand about the complexity of migraine. Even though stress is a major factor for many patients, we haven't quite mapped out the exact pathways by which that, it occurs.
Shortly, I'd really like to hear how, through diet and lifestyle change and nutrients, how you were able to find relief from your migraine problem. But first, I know that dry eye is another condition that you've seen patients about and helped patients with. Let's focus on that just for a second. What causes dry eye?
So dry eye can be multifactorial, but in the majority of patients, in about 86% of patients, people have dry eye because the tears that these people who have dry eye, they can produce enough tears, but the tears evaporate very quickly off the surface of the cornea, leaving the cornea dry. That's in the vast majority of patients, that's the number one cause of dry eye, is what we call evaporative dry eye.
Okay, and what is identified as the cause of that situation?
So underlying that, we have to go into a little bit of eyelid anatomy here. So in the eyelids, we have these tiny little glands that are called meibomian glands. And these glands secrete oils. And when the glands aren't working properly, or if they're structurally not intact, the oils are not secreted onto the surface of the eye properly, and then the tears quickly evaporate. So you need to have some kind of coating on top of the liquid part of the tears to keep them from evaporating. And when the glands don't function, that leads to dry eye through evaporative causes.
Is this something to be concerned about? Because I know it's a very common problem, dry eyes. Migraine is also a very common problem, and you've spoken about how often people are experiencing both of these conditions together. And I can see many people not thinking too much about it, maybe just taking the prescription or the over-the-counter medication to handle their migraine, or taking the eye drops for the dry eyes. Is it something to be concerned about?
In the vast majority of cases, no. All these conditions, dry eye, migraine, even light sensitivity, are very, very common in the population. And if people take the right measures, then they can reduce their symptoms and perhaps even eliminate their symptoms. I know that they can be really very bothersome and cause concern or even anxiety when they happen. But just most people should realize that in the long term, these conditions don't lead to anything serious like permanent vision loss or blindness or any other type of major damage.
I'm sure hearing that will reassure a lot of our viewers, Dr. Banik. At the same time, I also know that ocular inflammation can be associated with dry eye. What about that situation? Could that be a cause for concern?
It can be, yes. In some patients, there can be inflammation on the surface of the eye. The cornea itself can get inflamed. The glands that I mentioned earlier, they can get inflamed. The eyelids, the eyelid margins, like the border of the eyelids where the eyelashes come out from, those that area can get inflamed as well. So this is part of dry eye syndrome. There are, again, it's multifactorial. So it's not just a single root cause. It's usually a combination of multiple things. So the glands not functioning properly, plus inflammation, perhaps a nutritional deficiency. So we know that people who are deficient in omegas, particularly omega-3 fatty acids, can be at higher risk for having dry eye. So all of these things need to be considered when examining and evaluating a dry eye patient.
On the issue of inflammation, we've recently done a number of interviews on the gut microbiome, and the discoveries seem to be mounting of just how influential it is to overall health. I hadn't heard anything up to this point about the relationship between the gut microbiome and eye health, so I was very interested to see that you've produced some videos on that. This ties into inflammation as well. So what is the connection there? How does the gut microbiome affect the health of the eyes, or how can it influence dry eye, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is really an emerging field, the connection between the gut microbiome and eye health. And so this is, again, really early research, but there are studies to show that when there is gut dysbiosis, which means that in the gut, there are certain populations of bacteria that we consider healthy bacteria and not so healthy or pathogenic bacteria. And there's always a balance between these two classes of bacteria. And so when there is an overabundance of unhealthy pathogenic bacteria and fewer healthy bacteria, we call that gut dysbiosis. And we're learning that there are certain eye conditions that are linked to gut dysbiosis, including not just dry eye, but also including macular degeneration and uveitis, which is a class of ocular conditions that involve inflammation inside the eye. So not just on the surface of the eye is what we see in dry eye, but inflammation actually within the eye, the ocular structures, that has been linked to gut dysbiosis. For example, I can tell you, we already know that there are certain types of bacteria, bacterial infections, Shigella, for example, or Yersinia, that can be linked to uveitis. So we know that already. But in terms of some of the other broader conditions like macular degeneration, dry eye, we don't have enough data yet to say with certainty that, okay, this specific organism or this combination of organisms, it's what's causing this ocular problem. But what I tell my patients is the research is early, yet there's enough research to support the importance of having a healthy gut microbiome. And so I always tell my patients, you're working on your diet, but also pay attention to your gut. Make sure that you're having lots of probiotic and prebiotic foods. So you're getting these foods naturally. And in some cases, you may want to supplement with a probiotic supplement as well, but try to get those probiotic foods in your diet. So fermented foods like yogurt or kimchi, sauerkraut, other types of fermented soy products. These are or pickled vegetables. These are all wonderful for your gut. And ultimately, they'll also probably help to support your eye health as well.
Right, that's fantastic general advice, Dr. Bannock. To just take the standard commercial yogurt off the shelf, you're probably not going to get the results you're looking for in that situation.
Well, probably not, unless it has a very high CFU count or colony forming unit count. So you have to look at how many live bacterial, read the labels and see how many live bacterial colonies there are. And also try to stay away from the highly sweetened, like fruit-based yogurts. That's basically having dessert. So try to have more natural forms of yogurt with a high bacterial colony count.
The other side of nutrition, what did you find for your migraines? What was the core of your strategy for getting through that?
Yeah, so I'll have to make a confession here. Before I realized this, I had a extremely unhealthy diet. I was basically eating what many practitioners call the SAD diet or standard American diet. So I was having a diet that was highly processed, high in lots of sugar, and high in unhealthy omega-6 fats. And so I was living off of pizza, ice cream, and diet soda. For years of my adult life, that was my diet, because I was busy as a doctor, I had a family, so I would quickly just get what I could get at the cafeteria or even at home late night. And so I never really thought much about that. I just thought that was kind of normal, until I realized that perhaps some of these foods were doing me not justice when it came to my migraine. So once I started swapping out those foods for natural foods, I really barely had any fresh fruits and vegetables in my diet before. Maybe I would have a banana. That was about it. But I really started to include a lot more vegetables that were greens. So leafy greens like spinach, kale, Swiss chard, arugula, any kind of green basically, broccoli, and the whole class of cruciferous vegetables. I started to include a lot of that. So broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, these types of vegetables.
Is there a specific value to these green leafy vegetables?
They have a very high nutrient profile. So they provide some eye vitamins, which we can talk about as well. But what's specific to migraine, they provide a lot of the B vitamins. They provide iron. They provide folic acid. So a host of minerals as well. So all of these combined, I think, with my diet, when I swapped out the unhealthy foods for more healthy foods, I started to have a green smoothie every morning with 3 cups of leafy greens, berries, some seeds like chia seeds, flax seeds. Just swapping out for those types of choices started to make a big difference. And also I started to cook, which I think was a very positive side effect of having these chronic migraines. Before, I would never take the time to cook. And I realized the importance of making my own meals and knowing where my food was coming from and knowing what types of ingredients I'm putting in there, what types of oils I'm cooking with. what types of spices I use. So I think that shift really made a huge difference for me in terms of my migraine journey. And that's really when things started to turn around, is when I changed my diet. And I also did start with some supplements, specifically magnesium and riboflavin. What's shocking is that I live in New York City, and I'd been to some of the top migraine doctors here in New York, and not one of them had asked me, what are you eating? And how much caffeine do you have? And do you take any supplements? Meanwhile, there is a wealth of information that suggests that magnesium and riboflavin can significantly reduce the frequency and severity of migraine. Yet none of my doctors ever mentioned that to me. And this is some years ago, about 10 years ago, but still, it was in the literature. Now I think more people are cognizant of it and more doctors are aware of it. So they do make these recommendations to their patients. But when I was suffering, I had no idea. And even as a physician myself, I didn't know. So I started to take magnesium. And
I know there's a range of different types of magnesium you can take. Is there one specifically helpful for migraine?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Brandon. So there are many different magnesiums out there that are available. Some are great for gut health, for constipation, for GI issues. But the types of magnesium that you want to include for migraine are the forms that are chelated. Now, chelated means that the magnesium molecule is bound to something else to help it get into the brain. And so you want to get a chelated form of magnesium, such as magnesium glycinate, or magnesium threonate, or magnesium malate. These are bound to organic acids that can get into the brain, versus magnesium oxide, which is a salt. That's great for GI issues, but it may not necessarily get into the brain. Even though, by the way, most of the studies using magnesium in migraine use magnesium oxide at 400 milligrams a day, it causes a lot of GI issues. So I would try to steer clear of the oxide and try one of these three other forms of magnesium.
It sounds like excellent advice, Dr. Bannock. You mentioned coffee there. Is that a particular concern for migraine?
Yes, and actually
and why?
Coffee it's such a double-edged sword when it comes to migraine. So some people, if they don't have much caffeine in their diet, they use coffee as a treatment. They have a little bit of caffeine, or they have a soda once in a while, or they have some tea, and that helps to calm their migraine. So coffee in moderation, or caffeine in moderation, can be used to treat migraine. It can help to knock out a migraine attack. But if you already have a significant amount of caffeine in your diet, then your brain and the blood vessels in your brain become less responsive to the caffeine. Caffeine works on adenosine receptors on our blood vessels, helping to change the tone of our blood vessels, either constrict them or dilate them. And so too much caffeine basically makes these adenosine receptors less receptive. And so you want to modulate your amount of caffeine if you already have a lot. And so what do I mean by a lot? Well, I would say, if you have migraine, or if you're prone to migraine, about 200 milligrams of caffeine is kind of the upper limit. That's approximately about 2 cups of coffee a day is kind of the upper limit. If you have more than that, now, I'm going to confess, when I was in my worst, days or years of migraine, I was having 8 to 12 caffeinated beverages a day. And that number kept going up because I would try to use it to help me with my symptoms. But what ended up happening was I just needed more and more and more and more to try to get the same effect. So what I would suggest is, if you do have more than 200 milligrams a day, try to slowly wean off. I would not recommend just stopping completely cold turkey, because your brain will have a rebound migraine or rebound headache, which is a horrible, horrible headache. Trust me, I've been there, I know. So you want to try to slowly decrease your caffeine intake to get it down to that max of 200 milligrams. And a tip I usually give my patients is cut down by half a cup per week. So slowly get your brain used to that next lower dose of caffeine until you slowly get down to 2 cups or even less a day.
Right, so the withdrawal isn't too overwhelming. Getting back to this triangle of conditions that we've been talking about, the migraine, dry eye, and the photosensitivity or light sensitivity, what is it that connects these things together?
Yeah, so they all link back to the same nerve that is somehow irritated. And when that nerve, which is called the trigeminal nerve, gets irritated, then pain can follow. So migraine is along the different branches of the trigeminal nerve. This nerve has specific branches that go to the face. So there's one branch that goes to the forehead and the eye socket and the eye itself. The second branch goes to the cheek and the upper jaw. And then the third branch goes to the lower jaw and then the lower face. So pain can be anywhere in those distributions, but specifically, there are branches of this nerve that go to the cornea on the surface of the eye. And these branches can also be triggered by dry eye. So when the surface of the cornea dries out, then those tiny little branches are irritated. There are signals sent towards the brainstem, which is in the center of the brain, that triggers the pain pathway. So that's how they're all connected. And then those pathways connect up with another center that is responsible for modulating light sensitivity. So we still don't know the exact intricate details of all these pathways, but we do know that these nerves are involved.
And in speaking about these conditions, the topic of our often excessive screen use naturally comes to mind. It's this kind of a necessary evil of our times, how much time we spend on screens. I see this is something that would quite likely exacerbate dry eye, exacerbate migraine. Perhaps you could confirm whether that's the case or not. And also, Dr. Banik, maybe you could suggest a way that we could deal with this to reduce the amount of strain that the devices puts on our eyes.
Yes, so definitely increased screen time is associated with worse headaches. Many people are also very light sensitive to the blue light coming from the screen, and that can also trigger headaches and migraine. And then also when we're on our screens, we blink less, and that can trigger dry eye. So I'll give you a fun fact. Most people blink about 15 to 20 times a minute. And when we're on our screens, we only blink about 3 to 5 times a minute. So significantly less when you're staring at a screen all day. So your eyes may dry out, plus the light may be triggering headaches. So some tips I would say, some very, very simple things you can do would be to schedule breaks. So every 20 to 30 minutes, set your timer, take a 20-second break. And so we call this in the world of ophthalmology, we call this the 20-20 rule. So every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break. And all you have to do is just look away. You can look out the window, or better yet, you can actually close your eyes for 20 seconds. And by closing your eyes, you're naturally lubricating your eyes. So your tears are spreading over your cornea. So that's a very simple thing. Other things you can do would be to keep a small humidifier by your desk if you have dry eye and you have migraine. So, like a little desktop humidifier can be quite helpful to really humidify the air around your workspace. Try to avoid any fans or ventilation. So I have some patients who have an overhead fan in their office, and they're working in their office under the overhead fan and their eyes are drying out. So, very simple things. You can move your workspace or not use the fan or try something else for cooling purposes. Maybe vents not directly aimed at your face, but in other directions. So there are little things you can do. And of course, ergonomics is very important as well. So many people have their workstation set up so that their screen is up high. Even if it's up, let's say 6 inches, 12 inches, when you're looking up at your screen all day long, the bottom of your cornea will dry out. So it's best to have your screen positioned at eye level. That's the ideal position, or even a little bit below eye level. So your eyes, when you're looking, are not as wide open as when you're looking up, when you're angled up this way. So these are some very, very simple things people can do for dry eye and migraine. There are also some screen filter apps that I love that I recommend to my patients that help to decrease the amount of blue light coming from their screens and the flickering coming from their screens.
We can add those to the description, Dr. Banik, so the viewers can check those out. Thank you for that great practical advice, Dr. Banik. Really appreciate you coming on Vital Signs, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
We've learned that adjusting diet and lifestyle can improve migraines where taking medication might have failed. We've also learned how improving gut health can benefit eye health, and specifically help conditions like uveitis. Dr. Banik will be back soon to talk about nutrients to stave off eye damage, eye aging, and specifically macular degeneration. Let's take a quick look.
One of the symptoms that is very unique to macular degeneration is this distortion in vision or waviness. If it starts to look a little bit warped or distorted, please get that checked out. People who smoke have more than a double chance of developing advanced stages of macular degeneration. We know that people who are exposed to air pollution have higher risks for macular degeneration. People who are overweight, who are sedentary, they have higher risks as well. Everyone thinks of eye nutrition as eating a few carrots and your eyes will be fine, you'll have 20/20, but carrots are really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to nutrition.
How do you recommend people get these nutrients for their eyes? You can check the description below to see if that video's already been published. It's been great to be with you. I'm Brendan Fallon, and this is Vital Signs.